Oh, welcome. Today on the show, we have Sunena Gupta. She is episode 4 in this beautiful series that I'm doing with CleanTech Group about their Global 100 report from the end of last year. Today's episode discusses resources and environmental management. What is that? Seemingly a massive bucket, a massive umbrella that has adaptation. I wrote it down. Water, infrastructure, mineral exploration, Earth observation. I mean, what are we talking about? How is one person in charge of reporting on this? This seems like a massive bucket. But well, if you listen long enough in the episode, very organically and naturally, Sunena and I reach a point of understanding, something that ties all of these different buckets together, that really changed the way that I am able to understand, and hopefully you, this industry of resource and environmental management. So very excited for you to listen. With that framework, you're able to better understand the different innovations and activity happening. So, yeah, very inspired by that conversation. Thank you, as always, to the sponsors, CleanTech Growth Lab. If you're looking to grow in clean tech, they're the people to do it with, and the producers of this podcast, Craze and Friends. With that, I give you Sunina. Oh, welcome to another episode of The Grove. Shout out to the sponsors. Mentioned just before we pressed record. Without them, it would not be possible to interview awesome people doing awesome things like Sunana. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Blake, for having me on this.
Absolutely. This is a special episode number 4 of our series with CleanTech Group, dissecting their end of year report. Yeah, before we get into it, if you could just give a brief introduction of yourself and what you're building, and introduction of the Global 100.
Yeah, for sure. I'm Sunena Gupta, and so what I do at CleanTech Group is I'm on the market intelligence team, and I'm in our sector called resources and environmental management. And so it's a pretty broad group of kind of technologies and markets that we cover, but the resources side is a lot of kind of natural resources and sustainable use of resources. So that can be water, that can be mineral exploration, it could be things like biodiversity and forestry. And we're looking at the tech in that. And some people are surprised that there's tech to do with forestry and biodiversity, but there is. And then for the environmental management side of things, it's a lot of monitoring technologies, trying to see a lot of things via Earth observations, satellites, sensors, just monitoring the environment, the Earth, anything to do with extreme weather and natural disasters as well. So pretty broad, but super interesting stuff.
No, yeah, I was gonna say that's a lot of pretty intense areas for
Yeah.
you to report on in in a single section. So,
Mhm.
um, quick question before we start.
Yeah.
How how did you get into this? Have you always wanted to be a clean tech reporter? Or did something happen at some point?
Yeah, good question. I think I kind of stumbled into it a few years ago. I think growing up, had almost like no interest, if that's okay to say. But
About even,
yeah, I
of
think I
course,
just
okay.
I just didn't know a lot about this space, which is funny because my dad has been working in the clean tech space for a really long time, like more from the finance side of things and renewable energy. And when I was a kid, he would tell me like, this is a really cool space to work in, and like try to get these little like kids books about like solar and wind and all of that. And I just didn't really care at that point. And then I kind of got into public policy when I was in college, and I was like, okay, this is really interesting. And I liked the impact that kind of came out of that. And I was in that for a little bit. And then when I went to do my master's program, it was a public policy program, but they had a pretty big focus on climate and environment. And I was like, okay, this is actually really cool. There were a lot of really cool speakers and professors, and I just kind of kept stumbling deeper and deeper into the topic, just realizing the intersection between climate, tech, environment, sustainability, also healthcare. I think I just kept finding it more and more fascinating. Ended up at CleanTech Group, and luckily I'm still in a place where I'm like, okay, this is still really fascinating. There's
Right.
always
Well,
something new going on here.
was it always? um, was it always an interest to be somebody that takes a bunch of information, that synthesizes it, and reports on it? Because there's a lot of different ways that you can get involved in the
Mhm.
sector, and what you do is pretty
Yeah.
specific. So,
Yeah, I think when I was younger, I was kind of interested in like law and journalism. So I guess in that sense, I was always really interested in kind of reading, writing, dissecting like the key insights and being able to present that in a clear way. So that's kind of what drew me into this space. I think didn't expect to get that involved in kind of the startup scene, or I maybe just didn't know that much about it. But I think that's what I find really fascinating, like the amount of innovation that's out there and being able to go and talk to all these people working in this space and then go and tell the rest of this world that this really cool stuff is going on that they should pay attention to.
so what do you think? What do you think the purpose is of storytelling in that way, or report, or writing about it in the way that you do? You know, because there's different ways you could think about why it matters.
Mhm,
You know, but I guess the most high level being, well, it's just exposure, it's just press. You know, like we're saying. But what
mhm.
to you? What really is the importance of the mechanism of research reporting and writing and things like this in clean tech space?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's kind of what I was alluding to, that there's just so much going on, and it's no doubt all important, but not all of it is applicable to every single person. Like when we're talking to specific corporates or investors, or any kind of organization, I think a big part of our role is really understanding what their goals are, how they're thinking about it, and then sharing what information we have. And a lot of that is presenting our own opinions, because there's this whole range of information, but there's no value to what we're doing unless we can say this is our opinion on like what's going to win in this space and like what's not worth looking at. Like maybe not always in those words, but
Yeah.
when they're trying to analyze like what different directions you can go in, if there's like 50 startups and working on the same technology, really being able to dig deep and say that okay, this is the technology that works for the economic value, for the type of technology it is, for the sustainability outcome. And I think that's really impactful to be able to do that and deliver that type of information. And it's not just about like people that are already working in the space. For anyone else who's like new to it, I think it's interesting information, and it has been changing the way that we operate our day to day.
Well, with that introduction, why don't we get into, I think the section that, no offense to anybody that I've spoken to. I mean, these conversations have been unbelievably incredible, but this is a particular passion of mine, this section,
Mhm,
Earth observation and water and resilience adaptation, stuff like this. So, before we do any of the more specific sections, how do we understand what this is? Resources and environmental management. What is it?
mhm. Yeah, so there's different kind of ways to think about it. So like we call it resources and environmental management. I think a lot of the topics that come under this section is what kind of the buzzwords of adaptation and resilience are. So we're really looking at what we're really looking at in that sense is we've pretty much realized that we're not meeting this 1.5-degree goal. So adaptation technologies are the ones that are kind of helping us live with this new type of climate, or the changes that we're seeing in weather and natural disasters and climate hazards. And resilience is kind of the outcome of, okay, this is what we're trying to achieve. So when we're looking at like maybe floods, like adaptation is like technology that can protect our coastline so that we're not getting flooded in. But resilience is the outcome of kind of being more flood resilient. You want to make sure that that's not affecting your communities. And there's so many spillovers with different types of weather, with healthcare, with just infrastructure and all of that.
So if we're talking about resources and environmental management, adaptation, I'll just say adaptation because resilience is the outcome of adaptation. Adaptation is just one bucket of that
Yeah,
section.
so it's
What are
kind
the
of,
other
yeah, there's a
buckets?
lot of overlap. So yeah, adaptation and resilience is kind of like the big bucket at the moment that we're focusing on. Apart from that, you mentioned water, and so water is its own whole thing of its own. Of course, there's water resilience, but then there's things like water infrastructure, which is really important. And then when we're looking at infrastructure, there's everything to do with kind of making our infrastructure better, or like more resilient to these extreme weather, or natural disasters. And then kind of on the resources side of there's things like mining, but like I would look at more mineral exploration because that's kind of actually getting out the resources in a more sustainable way.
Okay. So when you say, okay, so you said mineral extraction. That's
Exploration.
exploration, because there is a whole section, but that is like in the report of minerals and materials. But the exploration piece of it falls into this bucket again in this framework, and then everything else has to go with materials and chemicals.
Mhm.
Um, so I have resources, environmental management. Like you said, there's overlap, so this isn't perfect, I get that. But
Yeah.
resource environmental management, adaptation, water, infrastructure, mineral exploration.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think for the most part, that's kind of that's one way to put it. The way we kind of do it at our company is we have this whole taxonomy of like every single type of hazard. So we'll have a section for wildfires, for floods, for storms, for heat, and then we'll also have kind of like different like risk analytics. We'll have earth observation. There'll be a section on sensors. So that's kind of how we map it out. But I think broadly, the way that we're speaking about it is, I think generally when I'm speaking to the public and we're like, we're writing about things, those are like some of the main groups that we talk about.
Great. All right, let's run with it then.
Yes.
So, clarifying question, when you say infrastructure, what infrastructure are we talking about? Like typically bridges, roads, buildings. I don't kind of what else is there?
All of the
Sewers.
above. Yeah. Yeah, bridges, roads, buildings. Sometimes we would include the grid. I know that's more kind of like energy and power, but like protecting the grid from like natural disasters again would be something I look at pretty closely.
Okay. Well then, at this point, now that we have this framework, I'm
Yeah.
actually curious. And I know that this is your research area, so this is all of this is interesting to you. But is there anything
Mhm.
that's like something that's very interesting to you or exciting from this report out of these buckets?
Yeah, I think like at least for the Global Clean Tech 100 report, kind of the way we like to do it is report on the key trends that we see in our sector. And I think more and more we're seeing Earth observation as really underpinning so many of the other, like, kind of all the different sections that we're seeing, in this sector. Yeah.
All right. So then Earth observation, let's do it.
Yes.
What is it? What are we talking about?
Yeah, so good question. Before I start throwing that word out. So Earth observation, it can be satellites or sensors, anything that really helps us to monitor the Earth, monitor climate, monitor like what's happening underground as well, and any changes in that respect. Those are the technologies that we're seeing that come under Earth observation. And there's another part of it. It's not just kind of observation and collecting data, it's also the data analytics and the insights that you get from it. So it's that whole kind of end to end. I'll give you an example. Like for wildfire, satellites can be a really, really strong technology to see detect wildfires early and to like take action. So you don't want to just see the wildfires. You want to be able to kind of see the changes that they're making, the progression that they're making, what impact they have. Some technologies are going into forecasting, and then you wanna be able to build that into kind of existing workflows where it can alert firefighters or alert, rescue operations, immediately.
So then does this again simply break down into data collection, data analytics?
That's often how I talk about it, data acquisition and data analytics.
Okay,
Yeah, I think that's kind of the simplified way to break it down.
great. Well, if that's what you talk about it, then that's how I want to talk about it. That's what we're going to talk about. So we have data acquisition, data analytics. Something that I read that I wrote down is this thing called data to insight chain.
Uh-huh.
What is that? Is that literally just saying what we just outlined, the acquisition to the analytics chain where you could turn it into, like, decisions?
Yeah, so it's just that, like, maybe before the data acquisition and data analytics were like two separate categories. I think the market trend that we're seeing is that more and more they're merging into the same platforms because it's not that valuable to just collect a bunch of data and give it to someone. And so a lot of the satellite providers are kind of going the next step to actually just producing the insights in-house because they have those capabilities. And then that kind of works both ways where we have data analytics companies like Live EO is one that very recently went kind of backwards in that chain and launched their own satellites or are planning to launch their own satellites. So more and more we're seeing that kind of end-to-end integration and that kind of serves as like a one-stop shop for anyone who needs to use that data where it's collected and presented and the insights are given to them in the way that they need it.
So is that what a company needs to be in order to be successful in this space, is vertically integrated?
I think so. Not that they can't be successful otherwise, but I think the market trend is going in that direction. So if you're not providing it, what we're seeing is that a lot of companies will, there's a lot of acquisitions in this space, which isn't that common in the market at the moment, or at least in the last 2 years. We haven't seen kind of specific technologies that have a ton of acquisitions. But here you want to kind of be able to provide that end to end. And I think if you're providing raw data, you're not going to be getting very far in the market if you're not going that next step and actually providing insights and insights that are very tailored to that end user.
Okay, so other than either companies investing in vertically integrating, like you're saying that analytics company launching satellites, or companies acquiring other companies in order to be a full service, what else? What, like, where are these? Where are the use cases that we're seeing this happening?
hmm Yeah, there's so many. So I mentioned wildfires is one. So there's companies like HiSci, which are monitoring wildfires. There's Tech, which is a whole different type of satellites, which can detect heat, and they're also for wildfires. For flood monitoring as well, it kind of works the same way when we're talking about mining. So it's not just like natural hazards, but for mining, there's like hyperspectral satellites and sensors which can see what's underground, which without actually having to go and dig and extract. So that just saves resources. It gives you a better idea of what's actually underneath without you having to go and do that kind of operation. There's really good use cases for agriculture, for water. There's this company Hydrosat that kind of works at that integration. And then when we're
What
talking about,
what
sorry,
about water?
like just monitoring changes, or like for this company, for example, for Hydrosat, they have a use case which they started off with, which was for agriculture. So kind of being able to detect changes in land. And so when you're trying to look at crops and how much water you need, that's where some of these technologies come in, especially when you're looking at sensors. So it's not just satellites, there's also sensors, which can be kind of really localized and really decentralized into different areas. So whether that's farms or whether that's forests or on the grid, that can sense really, really small changes in climate or in how much water there is or how many minerals there are and things like that.
So again, though, so a lot of this are it sounds like a lot of the activity in this space goes around, I mean, we haven't talked a ton about the analytics side or
Mhm.
the tailoring to the end use case, but, like, the data acquisition side, is that mainly hardware driven?
Yeah, pretty much.
So, so within that question, I think this is, more related to what I wanted to get at with the vertical integration, but how else are companies innovating in this? Like, how what other advances are being made that are differentiating companies from other ones that are making them better competitors for these different use cases?
Yeah, I think there's like three overall trends that I'm seeing, and it's not that like one company is doing it a specific way. but kind of just overall in that like satellite or Earth observation space. So one really cool thing that's come about is small sats. And so satellites, when we would think of them a few years ago, they were really, really expensive. Like decades ago, they were kind of unimaginable to use for commercial use cases. They were more kind of a defense technology. But now with small sats, they're kind of making data faster to process. They're cheaper. They're more usable. So we're seeing companies kind of use different variety of satellites, and then similar with like sensor types as well. We're looking at like hyperspectral, which is really good at like detecting what's underground, like what I said for mining. And then there's like thermal sensors, which can detect heat and can detect fire. And if you're able to detect that from space, like you can do a lot with that information. You can check wildfire risk. You can monitor heat in different places, and like that's really useful for urban heat island monitoring. And so those are really exciting kind of like varieties in that. And then I think the last one, which I personally find really cool and I think is kind of like really disruptive to the industry, is edge computing. And so that means that these satellites can process data on board. So when they acquire the data, they process the data on board and then it gets sent down as insights rather than just like raw imagery. And so that really matters because in a disaster scenario, for example, speed is everything. Like if there's a wildfire, there's a flood, you don't just need raw imagery, you need those decisions made really fast or those like insights given to you really fast. And that kind of difference in minutes that you get can be super crucial when for those specific use cases.
Who's pushing that? How popular is that application?
Yeah, I think it's becoming more widespread, kind of all three of those trends. The kind of satellite and sensor types, obviously you pick one way or the other, but when it goes to edge computing, I think that's going to be something that's kind of widespread. It'll probably become table stakes in a few years.
Is it? Can I write that down as a hot take of yours? Does that count as a hot
Absolutely,
take?
yeah.
Okay. So, okay, so we talked about satellite variety is something that's differentiating companies, like companies just using different kinds of satellites, or are they developing the technologies themselves? Like, are they developing like new satellites themselves, or just acquiring and deploying certain kinds in a novel way?
Yeah, so it's more of different satellites being used for different reasons. And so again, kind of like going back to like the flood and wildfire example, the really common satellite type was this type called SAR, which is synthetic aperture radar. And that's really great because you can like use it at night. It can see through clouds. And that was kind of the norm when we were looking at satellites for this type of monitoring. But now there's companies like that are doing thermal infrared, which has a whole different kind of set of benefits, or when we're looking at kind of hyperspectral. So it's not like one company is doing different types of satellites. It's that there's new companies doing kind of like there'll be a company doing hyperspectral, there'll be a company doing thermal, there'll be a company doing SAR, but there's just a lot more variety and they tailor really
Oh,
well to different use cases because
okay.
they're
Well, that was
kind
my
of fixing each other's gaps.
yes, right. So that was my next question was I have written down here wildfire, flood, mining, ag, water as just some of the end use cases. Are these technologies applicable across different use cases, or are there technologies that fit these use cases best?
Yeah, I would say there's some that are working better in my opinion, for each of these use cases. I think like for mining, hyperspectral is a really strong one. I think
Okay.
for floods, SAR imagery can be really strong. For wildfires, it can kind of be a mix. And yeah, so it kind of goes they like I said, like they kind of address each other's gaps and
Okay.
it really depends on what you're trying to observe. If you're trying to detect something super early, or if you're trying to just monitor its progression, or you're trying to later see the
Interesting.
damage that it causes.
Interesting, and those kind of fall under this wow, well, that seems very different, like, the 'cause if a company's developing, a technology and they're saying, "Hey, we'll observe and collect really high quality data and get back to you so that you can, have high quality insights for whatever, and we're just creating the high quality data for you," versus, "Hey, we're a company that's gonna help you in a crisis." Those seem like very different companies, but are the same companies get involved in both types of spaces?
Yeah, I don't really think there's that much of a market for companies that are just providing raw data because it's especially when we're looking at these use cases, if someone can go to a company that can give them the data with the insights for exactly what they're looking for, there's not really much of a use case for them to then go and say, "No, we just want raw data and we wanna analyze it ourselves." Sure,
I
that could
see.
be a thing, but I think for the majority, that's kind of like the evolution of what we're seeing with data science and AI, that you're getting more and more tailored and niche in in those
Okay.
spaces.
Um, Anything else as far as Earth observation goes that you wanna touch? Because honestly, for me, that was extremely educational, very interesting, but, as far as your perspective, is there anything else happening that's interesting to talk about? Again, one of my favorites is water. So I wanna
Mhm.
know what that means to you. How do we understand water? How do you talk about it? How do you think about it?
Yeah, so when we're looking at water, are you asking, like, specifically within the Earth observation lens or just generally when we're looking at water?
Well, I guess both. So a diagram that I have here is resources and environmental management. We have different buckets. Earth observation is one of them, and water is one of them. Like we said, there's overlap,
Mhm,
but I guess outside of the Earth observation bucket, like how do you think about water? What is the market of water?
mhm. Yeah, so again, there's kind of like mini buckets under that, which like when we're looking at water, then we look at potable water. And so those technologies will be things that kind of get us clean drinking water. So like different types of desalination technologies or membranes. And then there's water monitoring. So there's this whole thing of kind of smart or digital water, which is again, kind of like sensors that are really like localized and decentralized that can monitor kind of how clean water is or changes in water, and all of those different types of aspects that you want to know when you're kind of evaluating like water quality.
Okay.
And then there's wastewater, which is kind of like a whole different thing. And we usually include under kind of our waste and recycling segment. And yeah, those are kind of just some examples as well. But I would kind of broadly put it into monitoring potable water, wastewater. Yeah.
So what's the main focus in this space? Like what's the activity that's happening? What are people talking about?
Yeah, so desalination is a big one in terms of there's all these technologies coming up, and we actually had I think a record number of innovators on our global clean tech 100 list. I think there were 8 or maybe even 9. So every year we're seeing more and more water innovators, and a lot of them are to do with kind of industrial water use cases, and so especially with more and more industries get like when we're looking at heavy industry, so we're looking at mining or data centers or semiconductor industries, there's a whole kind of part of it that's really critical to water use. So being able to reuse water, being able to treat water, being able to kind of get clean water as well. That's kind of what I'm looking at in my space. But yeah, definitely a trend that I love to see coming when we're seeing more representation on our list. We're seeing a lot of really interesting kind of capital and financing mechanisms to make these technologies more economical or marketable. And it's always really interesting to talk to water innovators because it's not as straightforward as the other ways in terms of like, oh, this is like a profitable or investable technology. They are, but that's kind of not always the way that they're able to be represented because water is kind of like a common everyday good.
But that's what makes it so interesting. I just had
Yeah.
a conversation with, this guy, John Robinson, who invests, in water specifically. He's based in the UK, and he was saying that, basically exactly what you're saying. He said it's hard to get people excited about it because people know water. He was saying, people know water, and people don't know water, like,
Yeah.
in the ways that you're talking about or the ways that we're speaking about, but it's
Mhm.
a familiar thing, and so people are like, "What do you mean?" Water industry, water tech, what does that mean? So to speak on the water quality thing that you just mentioned, you said, monitoring is a big space, so what does that even mean? Are we talking about, like, people being able to monitor? Are we talking industry? I
Mhm.
don't even know where else, what
Yeah.
are we talking about when we say water monitoring?
Yeah, people, industry, it's also like cities. So, I'll give you an example from Chicago. So we have the Chicago River, and I think last year they came up with this project where they have sensors that can detect the water quality, and so that's kind of what we include in monitoring, like changes to pH levels or changes in kind of what chemicals are in that water, and it kind of tells you like whether how clean it is, what it can be used for, what treatments it can undergo. And so it's kind of the base layer for a lot of technologies, just being able to actually tell what compounds are in that water. That can tell you a lot about what you can do with it and what it can be used for.
Are the innovations in that space having to do with, like, breakthrough technologies in the ability to monitor water or, like, more specific data acquisition? Or is it more so I guess, like we were talking about with Earth observation, space, is it more so being able to take, traditional data collection methods and be able to draw higher quality insights from them?
Yeah, very similar trends. I think whenever we're talking about sensors, it's the same kind of thing where like sensors are just getting better and better, and that's just kind of like a technology trend. But what it means in the market is that the actual insights and what you can do with that information, and also the speed at which you're getting that information, is really valuable. So it's not just like you're getting better information, but if you can get that really interesting or useful information within like a couple minutes or an hour versus like getting it next week, you can that can make the world of a difference.
So this general theme, I know we put it into a bucket, but I feel like it's tough to put into its own space, is this idea of, adaptation. So, can you I think it's important to understand that resilience is an outcome of adaptation, but how do we understand how about this? Is there an adaptation industry? Is that even a right way to think about it? If not, how do we think about it?
Yeah, I think I see it more as a market. So all these adaptation technologies are kind of forming their own market. Yeah, that's kind of the language I guess that I usually use.
Does Earth observation, water monitoring, like, are these versions of solutions or businesses that operate in this adaptation market, or is there something else that defines it?
Yeah, definitely. So I think kind of the way that we like to talk about it at CleanTech Group and like how I think about it is when we're thinking about adaptation, you're thinking about that 1.5-degree goal that we had. And if you're not meeting it, what are kind of the technologies, segments, markets, whatever you want to call it, that are coming up to make our world more livable? And so that definitely includes Earth observation because there's more extreme climate events going on, there's more extreme natural disasters going on. And so you need kind of better Earth observation technologies to be able to detect that, monitor that, and like help us live with it. And we're talking about water in that because water resilience is kind of a whole thing, thing with that as well. And we're talking about just anything to do with weather. So weather forecasting technologies would come under that as well. Kind of again similar to do with
Weather
sensors.
forecasting?
Yeah, forecasting. Um,
Does that mean something? Okay, so I mean, the reason I asked that is because weather forecasting to me immediately thinks like weather station, weather person just telling you the weather. Is it is it innovations there? Like, what do we mean?
yeah, surprisingly there is. So weather is kind of it's a really interesting space that I spent the last few months kind of looking into. So obviously you can check the weather on your phone and like for us day-to-day use, you want to know if it's raining or snowing or whatever. But when you're thinking about it on an industrial level, you're thinking about okay, you need to, some of these kind of like logistics companies, aviation companies, all of that, they're dealing with more unpredictable weather every year. And so these technologies come in and they're kind of not just answering the question as like, is it going to rain tomorrow? They're answering the question of, it's going to rain this much, and this is how it's going to impact each of your assets, and this is how you're going to have to change your decisions. So you're
Hmm.
going so many steps further. And so when you're looking at a massive logistics or supply chain company, it can be really valuable for them to kind of change their operations and know that in advance how they need to make changes to what they're doing and to protect their assets.
A little bit of a wild card question, I guess, is that when I would think about who needs that, economically speaking, who needs that information, I mean, it is people that own a lot of assets, potentially huge, a lot of real estate, things like that, but insurance companies. So, how much does do you guys? I mean, I don't think you spoke about it in the report, but I'm just curious, how much does that come up as far as like the insurance industry, or like the role that insurance plays as far as a demand driver for some of these markets?
Yeah, you absolutely said it the right way. Insurance is a really, really strong demand driver for a lot of these technologies, almost to the extent where it kind of has been the backbone for a lot of these adaptation techs and actually bringing them to market, helping them scale, because they're putting in all of these mandates and policies to make sure that infrastructure, for example, can meet their claims. And so then there's a whole market where infrastructure companies are like, okay, we need to make our buildings kind of wildfire proof or flood proof or whatever
Uh,
that might be. And same with kind of weather forecasting. It can be really useful for insurance providers to get that information and be able to. There's this whole world of parametric insurance that opens up as well. So again, so many kind of like interlinks, but I would
yeah,
definitely
really. This
say
is so
that
this
like
is so fun.
insurance companies are as such a driver of a lot of these technologies.
Why Ooh, okay, this might just be my perspective. I just came into the world of adaptation and stuff like as of a few months ago. I didn't really. I mean, I had discussed, like studied geology, had understood like infrastructure and like big scale like weather patterns and disasters and things like this, but I didn't really have the vocabulary to understand it as a market, or that people were in the adaptation industry or resilience, whatever. So um, was 2025 a year where it became like it entered the mainstream thought? Like, why 2025? Why not any of these years beforehand?
Yeah, so we started looking at adaptation resilience as like its own segment several years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But I think last year is really when things changed, and we like, for example, with clients or members of CleanTech Group, we suddenly started getting a lot of requests to talk about adaptation resilience, and a lot of those conversations start off with just trying to understand what they are. Like a lot of the conversation that we're having now, just understanding what are the technologies, what does it mean, is it investable, like what does it mean for them, and like what's applicable to them. And so there's suddenly just a lot more thought in this space. And I think again it goes back to that realization that okay, we can't just focus on mitigation technologies because we're not meeting that 1.5 goals. You absolutely need those technologies, but that's not the only thing. Now we need to start thinking seriously about adapting to these changing climate effects. And so there's just kind of a widespread shift that's happened in the last year, really, and more so in the last 6 months. And I think, like at our Clean Tech Forum, for example, there was just so much more of an emphasis on that. And so much of the conversation was just based around, like, okay, we need to start talking about this and we need to start acting on this right now.
But you think there's a specific reason, or it's just a buildup of, a few years? Like, is 2025 like some type of threshold where it was like, if, we just know for a fact that we're just not going back, or was it this administration, being voted in one of the largest countries in the world?
I think it's more of a buildup, to be honest.
Okay.
And I think it's also like, okay, if you started thinking about it a few years ago, last year maybe you're starting to realize that okay, there's evidence that this is a profitable market and it's something really impactful. So we're not just thinking about, okay, for the good of the world, we should talk about adaptation. But these technologies can do really well. And I think one use case that I kind of keep coming back to, but wildfires, I think there's been so much focus on wildfires over the past 2 years, like the wildfires in LA, for example, that happened last year. There was so much of a focus on it. And it's kind of a sad reason why this has come into light. But
Mhm.
because they're so destructive, they're happening more frequently, they're happening, like,
Okay,
around the whole year, like, in every
for
season
sure.
is limited to something. But with that, what you're also seeing is that there's technologies that are really, really good at predicting wildfires and detecting them, at, like, minimizing the destructiveness that they have. And so if you apply that same thing to, like, different types of, weather hazards, you realize that, okay, there are really, really good technologies and it's worth investing in them and it's worth paying attention to them. Not that wildfires are the only reason, but I do think them happening in LA has had a big reason why that kind of thought shift has come
Got
about.
it. Huge. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. Moving into into this next bucket. I think this is our last bucket here. There's a theme that you spoke to, and this idea of mineral exploration also centers around it. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm just putting this together now. This also centers around the quality of sensors, the
Uh-huh.
utilization of sensors, the acquisition of data, and the analysis of data. So at the beginning, before we entered this conversation, it seems like a big, huge bucket, resource and environmental management. But is it accurate to say that sensing and sensors and data analytics, like that is a through line between all these buckets?
Yeah, pretty much. I think now that I'm thinking of our taxonomy, yeah, sensing to insights is kind of a good way to be like, this is what's running through the whole sector.
Okay. Well, based on that, after this next section, I have a question. So I want to understand mineral exploration. I was told uh I'll keep it secret who told me. It was somebody that works with you, but they said that you're extremely knowledgeable about what's happening with mineral exploration. So what are the technologies happening here? What is it? Why is it important?
Mhm. Yeah, so a lot of what I focused on last year was AI and mining, and it's not just AI. It kind of goes into other digital tools. But when we're looking at mineral exploration, so I think everyone knows that, like, the rate at which our demand for minerals and, like, really critical minerals is going up. There's just more data centers, more electronics, just tech boom, all of that is just causing a need for, or that demand has kind of surged exponentially in the last few years. And so then the issue that you have is that, okay, well, we need the supply to kind of bring that in. And so with the supply, I guess to put it simply, it's like you need to figure out where the minerals are that you need and, like, where the deposits are. And it's also a matter of doing it kind of in a sustainable manner. So you don't want to just go and kind of be like, okay, I think that these minerals are going to be here and dig it up. There's a lot of technology that goes into that. And so again, it kind of goes into, there's massive amounts of mining data sets, which, like, big mining companies have about data that they've collected from mines and from different grounds. But you're being able to now analyze them better with AI. You're being able to sense and verify it better with hyperspectral satellites that I said. There's this whole world of quantum sensing that's coming about, which is super, super new. But
What is that?
yeah, that's brand
Is
new,
that
but
like
it's like
different
these
dimensions of sensing? Like they
these
sense in
little,
like
like,
6 dimensions?
quantum gravimeters, which can detect really, really minor changes in the ground or, like, in Earth.
Oh my
So again,
gosh.
we're coming back to the theme of
That's
sensing and
amazing.
then pulling the data and then using the data for something valuable.
What's that called? Quantum what?
Gravimeters or quantum sensors is kind of the main
Gravimeters.
term.
Like does that produce okay, so with each of these different types of technologies that that sense and gather data in different ways, how different is the data that they collect? And is a layer of innovation in the space around building new technologies or ways to be able to synthesize that data.
Yeah, so when you're
Is
talking about being able to synthesize that data, that's coming about with progressions in AI, ML, all those fun buzzwords that we hear. They're really, really useful in this case because whatever data you have, just being able to kind of analyze it better, analyze it more quickly, it all kind of comes down to that. And that's useful for miners as well because you're saving resources that you can
Mhm.
use when you have less information. You might go and try to extract where it's not that valuable for you to extract. So it's just leading to more resource efficiency in that way. And the whole mining industry is going through this thing where they have kind of a talent gap because a lot of the people that were traditionally miners, now that they're kind of being trained for this data type of role, they can go work at a big tech company. They're not necessarily going into mining.
Whoa,
Okay,
that's
yeah.
so
So there's all
interesting.
these like big dynamics that are going on in the mining industry that's really building a need for these technologies. And I think you already know, but when we do our research, we speak to a lot of these companies. So we speak to like these big mining majors, you speak to
Wow.
these innovators, and they all kind of say the same few things that this demand is coming from this way. And a lot of their technologies are, it's not just about like better AI or better sensing. It's kind of being able to use it and get creative and like where it can be used within this industry.
So where in the world are these technologies like as far as mining goes? I believe from our conversation yesterday, there's, I forget what we were talking about, some one of the rare earths, but a lot of mining activity in Chile, a lot in the DR Congo, Zambia, I mean elsewhere. But I'm just thinking, like, where are the deployments of these types of technologies happening?
Yeah, so kind of what you said, there's pretty big testing grounds or use cases in Australia and Canada and Indonesia, I believe. So it is a pretty global technology. But I think kind of one of the challenges that innovators face is that what happens in the mining industry is that they're kind of notoriously known as not wanting to be the first person to use a new technology. So they're not like nobody wants to like bet on like there's this cool new technology. Let me be the first one
Yeah,
to try. You want to be the fourth or fifth or sixth person,
for sure.
one person company to kind of try it, and that's just like industry inertia. And then it doesn't just stop at that. It's also like they kind of want to know like this technology is going to work at my specific mine in these specific environments. So there's all those kind of layers that innovators have to prove before their technologies can actually take off. And they are doing it. There's really great examples, and a lot of like pilot programs come in, which can be really valuable in that, in helping them prove that.
Okay, so last thing I want to ask you about is that because I'm kind of excited. I mean, this
Yeah.
thing is like I feel like we discovered something together. I mean, it's something that you knew, but it's something that
Yeah.
I feel like I've discovered. Is this through line about sensing and how it's it really ties, because like I said, I just can't, like, it's crazy how far apart, how broad this bucket seemed, but the deeper we get into it, it really is like sensing is everywhere, and then making sense
Mhm.
of that data is everywhere.
Yeah.
And so within that, could we just go over um one more time, like, and I have a follow-up question. So just what are the main sensing technologies to be on the lookout for? So I have SAR, satellite,
Uh-huh.
hyperspectral sensing, thermal sensing. Edge computing isn't really a sensor type, right? That's
Yeah,
more
that's more of like the
analytics.
future.
Quantum gravimetrics,
Gravimeters, yeah. The
gravimeters.
quantum sensors. Yeah, I feel like that's not one you can quiz me on. It's so new.
That's okay, that's how I want.
Trying to trick
But
companies.
so thinking about this though, like, is hyperspectral specific enough, or does that even break down further? Like, how do you know?
Yeah, at least the way we look about it, that's kind of the the layer that I've been
Great.
going to. I'm sure it goes deeper than
That's
that,
all right.
people that are actually building these
That's all right.
things.
So then I'll say for right now, I've SAR satellite, I've hyperspectral and thermal. Are there any other innovations in sensing that excite you that are worth noting right now?
Yeah, I think we can put in another category called it's called in situ sensors, which are so right now we're talking about satellites. But there's this really cool company, Dryad, which is at least it started off as a wildfire company, and they have these little sensors in the forest, which can detect like smoke. And they can detect wildfires like at an ultra early rate. And when we're talking about in situ sensors, it's again, since you're interested in water, there's these like in situ sensors are like really, really localized or decentralized sensors that can be put into like different types of environments, and they can detect or sense different types of things. So think of that more as like a hyper localized type of sensor rather than like those satellites that will just be able to observe a big area or space.
What's a use case like that? Like a wastewater facility?
Yeah, or like that river, example that I gave you. So any kind of like water
Oh, right.
body, or industrial use case
Okay.
or agriculture as well.
Okay. So between these four, okay. Well, then, are there different on the other side of it? Data analytics. Are there also categories to put it in? Like, can that even be understood in that way?
Yeah, well, like a little while ago when we monitor it, we would break it up into these are the AI analytics and these are the non-AI analytics. But now I'm kind of seeing that if you're not incorporating AI, I don't think you have as strong of a business. So that's kind of one
Interesting.
category. I think the way to break it down is that there's different types of models, or AI methods or data science methods.
Like within this space, within any of these buckets, I wrote down some companies that you mentioned in the report, but I'm curious if you have any that you're specifically excited about.
Yeah, so I was kind of beginning to talk about Dryad. I think that's a really cool one. It's kind of one
Yes.
of those that disrupts the industry in a way because so I know till now I've been talking about okay, you sense data in different ways, you observe data in different ways, and it goes to insights. There's
Right.
also kind of another way to think about it. So you can sense the data. So when it's with wildfires, you're sensing smoke, you can detect that, okay, there is a wildfire forming here. You go send out the alerts. The next step that you see is that autonomous suppression. So you're stacking solutions. So it's not just detection, you're also adding in suppression technologies. So you detect the wildfire,
Well,
then these drones autonomously come and put out the wildfire. So you're saving resources for firefighters who can go use those resources for other things. You're also just minimizing kind of the destruction and the way that they have to kind of deal with these emergencies.
so companies are going as far as making the decisions of what's best and then deploying or acting on that decision.
Uh-huh.
Because I guess I mean that surprises me, but like, should it surprise me? Because I feel like it. I guess it's just it comes up to somebody making the decision at some point anyway. So I guess delegating it to these companies makes sense.
Yeah, and these technologies are tested in so many environments in so many ways that their accuracy levels are really, really high, and their decision-making capabilities just keep improving. And that's kind of, I think, like maybe it's surprising now, but I can imagine in a few years you'll be like, yeah, that's the norm. And when we're kind of speaking
For
about
sure.
this, companies are going to be doing detection to suppression. There's going to be forecasting put into it. I think that's what I kind of find really cool about working in this market is that the level of creativity or innovation is just always moving. Like just being able to detect a wildfire early, like a few years ago, that was groundbreaking.
Yeah.
Now you're like, okay, to be groundbreaking, you need to put out the wildfire.
Wow,
And if
that's
it's going to be something else.
crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. So just two, lighter, not as whatever deep questions for you, subjective questions, I guess I would say. Is there something that you believe or a direction, a trend that you see happening that a lot of other people don't believe in?
Um, yeah, I'm not sure if it's something that other people don't believe in. I think it's more of the what I see as like a really defining trend is solution stacking. So
What you just mentioned?
yeah, you're not just looking at one solution. It's kind of the basis of a lot of our conversation. You're not just doing one thing, you're kind of trying to go end to end as much as you can.
And then are there any trends that are popular that, that you don't think should be as popular as they are?
That's a good one. So I think a lot of the time the focus of the conversation is like, oh, there's this like cool new AI, and like especially like mining's a great example of that. Like there's so many companies that are coming out with like, oh, I our AI is like the best at this and or the best at this. And there's a lot of kind of big claims going out there. But I think I almost think of it as like having a strong kind of AI model is in like table stakes. Like that's kind of your base layer. If you don't have that, I don't think you have a business like at the end of this year. So beyond AI, what are you doing? Like, do
Mm,
you have a really cool or unique sensing technology where you're getting data that another company can't get? And then you have something really interesting because you have this data that other companies are not able to get with their technology. So you can build this insight, which they can't do. Your AI model, I think we're getting to a point where all companies are kind of being able to get really good analysis of data. I think what's more unique is what data you're getting and how you're collecting it.
hmm. So it's more like, "Yo, you got AI?" Like, "Yeah, I got AI." You're like,
Mhm.
"So what?"
Yeah.
So then what,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It's like, okay, well, everyone has that now. Like 2 years ago, sure, that was cool, but
It's not
I
cool anymore, you're not
yeah.
cool, okay?
I'm
No, that's
like,
cool, that's
yeah, next year to really stand out, there needs to be something more.
alright, well, I have, I mean, this feels, like a never-ending conversation. There's just, I have so many more questions than I started out with, which I think is always a good thing,
Mhm.
and it calls for, future conversations.
Yeah.
So, but at least for today, just, again, I mean, really started out with this. It seemed like a broad space. The conversation that we had brought a lot of these things together. Really helped me understand, how you look at this and what the interesting things are. I'm glad you shared some of your takes as well.
Yeah.
Um, I forgot to ask: is there a take that you have that your colleagues disagree with?
Oh, that's a good one. I feel like I'm like, maybe I don't know.
That's all right.
Like
I
like
will say Zainab said you guys all disagree. You agree that, the AI, like will be widespread adopted, but you disagree on the timelines?
yeah, I think that's kind of result of we're all monitoring different markets and technologies.
Yeah.
And so we'll have if you ask that same question to each of us, it might be different.
Oh, I mean, it sounds like it's happening quickly in this
Yeah.
space. So, my last question for you is just in general. I mean, do a lot of work. All really you work really hard to put this together. It's really important stuff. Overall, what inspires you?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think I'm just constantly working with really, really creative and smart people. So when we're talking to innovators, as I said, like, they just go beyond what you can think of, and them just having so much passion about their technologies and really, really impactful technologies. I love speaking to these founders and these innovators, when you're speaking to, like, investors and corporates, like, they're really trying to do something impactful and, like, learn about these technologies, and then when we're looking at just CleanTech Group in general, I mean, you've spoken to all of us now, so maybe you can vouch for it better than I can, but they're just really smart and passionate people, and I think that's kind of just what the whole industry seems to be. People just trying to make an impact, trying to learn together and get really creative and innovative about the solutions that we can come up with and talk about and build kind of as a community.
Well, I do second that. I
Yeah.
do agree, and you're absolutely one of them. This has been
Yeah.
such a wonderful conversation, Sunena. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
If anyone else was inspired to get in contact or follow along, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, LinkedIn is one way on our CleanTech Group LinkedIn page. I love talking to people as well about any and all of this. So reaching out on LinkedIn, we do have a research at CleanTech Group, research at cleantech.com email as well, which is the best way to kind of find out a little bit deeper about what we're talking and learning about.
Beautiful. Do it. Highly recommend. That's very
Yes,
similar to what I
we
did,
have
and
to
look what
talk.
happened. Cool. Well, thanks so much. I'm excited for the next conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
You got it.